Well, we're talking about a lot of things every day, lots of topics of conversation. And on this show, we try and pick something each day that touches upon really all of our lives, or at least most of us. Today, we're going to talk about giving to our parish. You ever wonder, where does your money go? And do you feel okay about, say, second collections? Or what about all these organizations that we're asked to support around the world, and you're scratching your head saying, I've never heard of that. Well, what do they do, and where is my money going? So, Deb, we're going to talk about this today, and, of course, we have a duty to support the church. So that's really where our conversation is going to start.
And you drive the show, dear listeners, so we would love to hear your experiences at your parish. Where does your weekly offering go, if you've ever thought about that? Or maybe you have really strong feelings about that and you want to know, where does it go? What am I supporting? Am I helping with the religious education program? Am I helping to buy hosts for Mass? Am I giving it to the priest as a stipend or his salary? It's an interesting topic, but we want to hear from you. Number to dial is 1-800-585-9396. Jump in quickly because the phone lines light up fast on Take Two, and we want to hear from you. So if you're prompted by the Spirit, call in 1-800-585-9396.
Well, as we said, we're going to start really foundationally because we do that. One of the precepts of the church, there are what are called precepts of the church, and one of those is, Debbie, as you know, and our listeners, I'm sure you know, we have a duty. The Catechism talks about this, a duty to help provide for the material needs of the church. This can take a lot of different forms, and so maybe I love what you said, Debbie. It's an awesome thought when you think about part of our weekly giving could be buying communion hosts. Mm-hmm. And they're just simple little water and wheat hosts until the priest says the words of consecration. It's a mind-boggling thought, folks, to think that when you put your money in the basket on the weekend, you could be providing the body and blood of Christ for somebody. It's an awesome thought, really, Debbie.
It really is. And a lot of times we don't think that way when we're putting in our offering during the week, and we're not really maybe even having that mindset. But it's important to know that you are, dear listeners, when you support the church, when you give of your hard-earned money to the church, you tithe or whatever you do in your family that works for you, you are keeping the church going in your local community, and that's huge. It's big because souls get changed, lives are changed. It's just amazing. It's an amazing ministry, Jerry. I like to look at it like that. I actually, Jerry, if you've noticed, I view everything when it's in relationship to God as a ministry. And dear listeners, we want to hear from you about it. 1-800-585-9396.
Well, and then let's take this a little further. We have that duty to give, and that can take different forms. It can look different for a lot of people. Your means may not be the same as the person sitting in the pew next to you. There are different ways of giving. For example, I use a service called Parish Pay. And so for a while, and this is something, as you're listening, you may want to call in and talk about, Debbie, for a while, I felt conspicuous when the basket came around, mm-hmm. and I just grabbed it and passed it to the next person. Right. And I thought, boy, people are going, look at that deadbeat over there.
How come he's not giving anything? Yeah.
Gee, what a cheapskate, And so it took me a while to get used to that, but now I know more and more people use services like that, so I don't feel too bad about that. But what about, here's another thing, is your priest comfortable asking for money? They call it, Debbie, sometimes the sermon on the amount, and a lot of priests really don't like to do that, and yet, Debbie, since we have that obligation, priests, I think, should feel very comfortable telling the parishioners, hey, we need your financial support.
Right. And a lot of ministries within the church, religious education, different groups. You even have funeral ministries. You have grief and bereavement. You have all sorts of ministries that are functioning in the church, and they need to function with some kind of budget to keep it going. You have to buy materials, supplies. Sometimes there's even staff members that will require a salary or a stipend, and it's important. Everything has a purpose in the church, and it has a function, and it has to be sustained. And we get to do that. It's our privilege to sustain it. And I think that is absolutely an amazing work, Jerry, and it's an important work. 1-800-585-9396. That's the number to dial to get in. We're talking about where does my weekly parish offering go. We're covering, like you said, Jerry, foundationally, and we're going to cover all angles of it because that's what we do on Take Two.
Wow, you just used a word that made me, I hadn't thought of it in this way. We talked about the duty, but you said privilege. Mm-hmm. It's a privilege. As you said that, what popped into my mind is I think of our duty, quote unquote, to go to Mass weekly and on holy days of obligation. I like to call them holy days of privilege, really, because we get to go to Mass. But let me introduce another thought here, Debbie, and I'm sure you've thought of this, and we hear of people sometimes who, because of very horrible indiscretions on the part of priests. We think about the sex abuse scandal. Some people say, well, you know what? My money's going to pay off lawsuits, and I'm just simply not going to give because of that. Right. Well, it's these are abominable actions on the part of a very, very tiny number of priests, but does that justify saying I'm going to withhold my money because of a concern that, well, the church is paying off all these lawsuits and so forth? Or should we just say, God, I'm going to give anyway because I have this duty to do so, and God, I'm going to let you sort it out. It's a touchy issue, really.
That really is, but unfortunately, I've heard that excuse used, Jerry, and the unfortunate thing about it is when people withhold their financial resources and refuse to give them over to the church, unfortunately, what hurts is these smaller ministries. A lot of times parishes cannot afford to hire a religious education coordinator. They can't afford to hire staff members to even man the offices when people need to come in to talk to priests or deacons. Liturgical services get cut. So many things get cut, Jerry, and it's unfortunate because then the parish community tends to not be, I want to say not as vibrant because there's not that many active ministries. So the little ministries end up getting hurt. And so that's an unfortunate thing. I pray that people who use that excuse would rethink it because it's, like you said, it's a small percentage, and for the most part, it basically goes to keeping everything functioning at the church, the lights on, the air conditioning, keeping everything moving along, so that when you, dear listeners, come in for Mass, there is a functioning church, and that's where your money goes, and it's really important. 1-800-585-9396. That's the number to dial if you want to get in. There's an open phone line. I'm looking at it, and it could be yours if you would just dial in.
Well, this is probably not likely to ever happen, but wouldn't it just be awful if we showed up for Mass on Sunday and the priest said, well, only half of you get communion this week? Mm-hmm. Because we don't have enough hosts or something. And that's obviously a far-fetched scenario. But any one of these things, folks, we can talk about. How do you as an individual or a family determine how much you're going to give? How do you split up your tithe, your weekly offering? Do you give X amount to the church, and then maybe you've got a pro-life ministry that you support as well with part of your stewardship, or vocations ministry, or homeless and the poor? So we're talking about all of this today, but as Debbie likes to say, your takes drive the show at 1-800-585-9396. We're going to get to your calls, so don't go anywhere.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
Don't you feel sometime like there's so many people in the world, how does he hear your prayer? Never think of that? Everybody thinks of that. I'm only a little grain of sand on the seashore. Oh, but that's not true. See, God is God. And you and I have to let God be God. I don't know how he does it. He's God. We have to accept this beautiful reality. It's a reality. God knows me, loves me, chose me before time began. How do you like that?
This is Father Joseph Mary.
This is Dr. Ray Guarendi, host of The Doctor Is In.
Hello, this is Bishop Mike Siss from the Diocese of San Angelo, Texas. Thank you for listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. The Take Two means we examine different topics, things that are part of our daily lives, hopefully from a unique perspective that helps us all come away with a better appreciation. And at the end of each program, we want to be more enlightened, hopefully inspired, drawn closer to God. And today, where does my weekly parish offering go? 1-800-585-9396.
The other thing I want to bring up, Jerry, is every diocese has different appeals. The bishop's appeal, whereby there's a joint effort on the diocesan part to be able to collect money throughout the year and dispense it to different organizations that the bishop deems worthy for the diocese to support. And I also often share with people when I go to different parishes, and I used to do talks at parishes, that it's very important that we also support the bishop's efforts for the diocese, because not only are we part of that, the community parish that we belong to, but we're part of the diocese, and we have to keep everything functioning, and it's an important role as well. 1-800-585-9396. Okay, Tracy, you are first up in Kentucky, listening to EWTN radio on Sirius XM 130. Hi, Tracy. Welcome to Take Two.
Hi, how are you this morning?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I really liked your topic today because it's so interesting, as you were saying earlier, that some people choose not to tithe for various reasons. They're frustrated or mad or whatever. But my husband and I have always, from the very beginning of our marriage, we've tithed the church. And as we've gotten older, and as our kids have gotten older, we've increased our tithing amount for various reasons. As our kids were going to school and moving on, we had more money, so we gave it to the church. And we've always felt compelled to support any church expansion when we had to go through school and the church, and gave a sacrifice, and it was a sacrifice from us to the church. We've always felt that, it's not ours really to begin with, so why not give what we can give to our church? Our girls went to Catholic high school, donated when they went into school. It's just, I don't know, I think it's just who we are as people, giving back to God what God gave us.
That's great perspective.
Yep.
It's not ours to begin with. I love, Tracy, your philosophy on that, and the whole thing about increasing your tithe. I'm very inspired by that. And you said there were circumstances that allowed you to do that. My pastor recently, I belong to the our pastor openly says is the wealthiest parish in the diocese, and I believe it is because we have it's just a wealthy area. I live a couple parishes over from there, but he asked us recently. Please increase your tithe, and I did that as well, by a little bit, because I felt that if he asked, then I felt a sense of duty to do that, and so Debbie, I think it's very admirable what Tracy and her family have done.
Sacrificial giving, tithing equals trust. And Tracy, you trusted in God and tithed, and that's what I actually used to give a talk on tithing, and it's all about trust in God, and to be able to have that really healthy disposition that you and your husband have when you said it's not really ours to begin with, and so you can sacrificially give it over and watch what happens. And the good Lord, the good Lord's amazing. I mean, I'm sure you could probably share amazing stories of how, and let me just state, people shouldn't tithe just to get something out of it from God, but we know that God is a faithful God and He's a wonderful God, and we know that He blesses us abundantly. Tracy, I'm sure you could probably... Right. You could probably share stories, testimonies in your own life of how God has blessed you back tenfold.
It is amazing, and any time I felt like we were in a crunch time because unforeseen, things come up and you think, oh my gosh, where are we going to get the money? And said a prayer, and God has always provided, always, always. And recently, my husband got this bonus. He didn't even know it was coming or anything, and we were really excited because we had some health issues come up, that we weren't able to give back to our respective Catholic high schools that we went to. And we're so excited when the money came because then we were able to go ahead and give them the donation that we had hoped to give. And I was just I'm about ready to cry because my husband always surprises me at his giving heart. Thank you, Jesus, for that.
Yes. Thank you, Jesus, for that. The Bible talks about God loves a cheerful giver. And Tracy, it sounds like you and your husband and your family are definitely in that category. Thank you, Tracy, for calling. Will you keep tuned in? Give us a call again another time.
Thanks.
All right. God bless you.
Thanks, Tracy.
1-800-585-9396. Take two with Jerry and Debbie, talking about where does your weekly parish offering go? Do you give generously like that? Have you had a situation where maybe a job loss or your finances changed and you were faced with that discernment and that decision? Lord, what do I do? What do we do right now? Do we stop giving for a time or do we increase it? Debbie, some people get really, I think, radical and trusting and increase their tithe at a time like that. Just relying on God to bless them. Like you said, he's not, I call it a gumball God. We don't put a quarter in and get something out. It's not the way it works, but God is never outdone in generosity.
I love what you just said, radical trust. Well, we have a radical God. He's amazing. So radical trust. Jerry, that's good. Can I use that in my next talk?
Sure, I'll rent it to you.
Okay, deal. I like that, though. That is really cool. Okay, Maria, you are up next. You're listening to EWTN Radio in Indianapolis, Indiana, on Catholic Radio Indy. Hi, Maria. Welcome to Take Two.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my. Sorry. Thank you for taking my call. I have kind of a question that I've been struggling with. I belong to a church that is. I hate to put any categories on people, but maybe more liberal versus conservative. And I definitely lean a little more toward conservative. And there was a fire, and they are rebuilding the church. And they have a committee, and on the committee what's been decided is that it was a very modernistic church, to keep it the same. And I was hoping, and some of the people on the committee also were hoping to bring some color and beauty and richness into the church. And that was pretty much voted down. And so it's this very stark, monochromatic, no images. The one image that is being allowed, which is the crucifix, is monochromatic, and you can't really see the corpus very well. So it's very disappointing, and I feel like in many ways it's not in keeping with our rich Catholic heritage of a beautiful, richly colored and visual church. So I want to be a team player. It is my church. I've decided not to leave, even though I differ with a lot of the people there in terms of theology at times, but feeling like to walk away is not the answer. But I'm struggling with giving towards a church that I don't think is very Catholic. I'm still giving to church. Like my weekly offering, I'm giving as much as I ever did, but I'm struggling with giving to the rebuilding of this church that I think it's ugly. And it does. I don't think it does. It's not in keeping with our Catholic heritage.
Right. So, Maria, let me ask you a couple questions because I've worked in the church for many, many, many years, the different parishes. So you sounds like you've joined some committees, and there's different groups that have different feelings. Have you shared your feelings with the pastor? And is the pastor has given his blessing on all this?
Yes, he's well aware of the different thoughts, and he says he's and I'm not on the committee, but he wanted it to be more beautiful, but he got voted down, so there's nothing he can do.
Ooh, yeah. See, well, that's unfortunate.
And I don't want to be mean-spirited. But I feel like there's this angst in my soul where I want to be a part of the parish. I want to, I don't know.
Okay. Well, and here's the thing, and that's an unfortunate position to put the pastor in. And I unfortunately, I actually worked for a parish. It was a similar situation, and sometimes pastors are caught between a rock and a hard place, trying to really keep the community thriving and trying to keep everybody happy, if you will. But here's the one thing that I really love what you had to say is that you have made the decision to stay in that parish community, and by your actions, by your demeanor, by your faith, others will be moved by that. And I've seen it happen. I have actually seen I know I'm thinking back to a parish that I was involved with, and there was just a strong element of very Orthodox Catholics that just lived out their faith joyfully and supported the parish and had thriving ministries, and the parish just evolved into this beautiful community. And so I commend you for staying and being part of the solution. And I just want to just reaffirm you that your faith, your actions, the way you live it out is going to be the greatest example. And here's the other thing too. Jerry said it at the beginning of the show. The Eucharist is everything for us. It's everything for us. And so when we are supporting the church, we are supporting the Eucharist. And it's vitally important that we remember that as a community, that everything we do needs to point to the Eucharist, needs to come from the Eucharist and point back to the Eucharist. And so anytime we give to anything or be a positive element of change in the community and grow people closer to God, we are growing towards the Eucharist. And we know that God's going to bless that because that's what he left for us, is his body, blood, soul, and divinity. And so I don't know if that helps at all, Maria, but I think it's very admirable that you're staying and you're being part of trying to make, a difference in some way. So I don't know if that helps at all in your advice on giving or what you called.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize. Maybe I didn't make myself clear enough. What I wanted to help with was, I don't know if you've heard of the book. It's called Ugly as Sin. It's written by Michael Rose, and he discusses how many of these modern churches, the reason they're so ugly is because we've departed from the teachings of the church, and so it's infested and infected our architecture and the way we build our churches, and it affects our theology and the way we pray. And so I guess what I wanted to know is because they're building a church that I do think it's not designed for worship, it's more of a meeting space structure doesn't lead us. Are you familiar with this discussion at all? How architecture?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
we're familiar with.
Okay, I'm struggling with whether or not to give towards the rebuilding of this church, which seems to me I don't know what the word is, that's what I'm struggling with. I'm still giving to the church regularly, but I'm struggling with rebuilding a church that I think is not in keeping with with church teaching, basically. They're hiding the Eucharist behind, they're taking the tabernacle behind where it can't be seen. It's just hard. And they spend a ton more money. They just say, we don't want to spend money, because then they spend a ton more money to spend a special chapel, rather than just putting, when the diocese says, no, you have to bring it to the front of the church. It can't be hidden away where it was before. Then they said, well, we'll build it, put it behind, where it's a separate room where you can't really see it. So I don't want to be a Pharisee. I don't want to be a Pharisee, but it's just hard.
Well, you've got a good heart about this, Maria, and I think you're going about it the right way. We do have a break coming up here. We can carry you over through the break, Maria, if you're able to stay. I just wanted to mention a couple things right now before we get to that point. First of all, I find it puzzling to me how a pastor. You mentioned that your pastor. You wanted to do it differently, but I guess the parish council or whatever outvoted him. That's always been kind of mind-boggling to me, because a pastor really, if I understand it correctly, has the final say in a parish. He's certainly called to collaborate with the parish council and the finance council and all of that. But be that as it may, one thing we need to keep in mind is that church architecture, while it is definitely supposed to convey the teachings of the church, if you will. For example, in usually the cruciform manner of the church and so forth, it doesn't. In other ways, it doesn't touch upon orthodoxy versus heterodoxy. But we can talk about this more on the other side. Maria, if you can stay with us, we're talking about where does your parish offering go on Sunday, or if you're like me, go to Mass on Saturday evening. 1-800-585-9396. Any aspect of your parish offering and this discussion, we hope you'll join us.
Dr. Greg and Lisa Popchak.
More to Life is about living the Catholic difference in our marriages, our families, the way we approach life in general.
It's about celebrating life and our Catholic faith and discovering all the ways God wants to bless us and help us be a blessing to others.
More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popchak, coming Monday to EWTN Radio.
From EWTN News Nightly in Washington, D.C., I'm Brian Patrick with your EWTN News Link. Donald Trump claims he never advocated violence, suggesting Second Amendment supporters could do something if Hillary Clinton is elected president and stacks the Supreme Court with anti-gun justices. Trump says he was talking about using voting power. House Speaker Paul Ryan easily wins Wisconsin's Republican primary. Trump refused to endorse Ryan a week ago, but finally announced Friday he would endorse him. Trump's gesture is seen as a payback for Ryan's earlier reluctance to back Trump for president. An apparent electrical fire in a maternity ward at a Baghdad hospital overnight kills 12 newborns. Angry relatives gathered outside the hospital in western Baghdad, blaming the government for that tragedy. And Pope Francis preaches on the witness of God's merciful love, which the Church as mother is called to give. At today's general audience in Paul VI Hall, he continued teaching on mercy in connection with the Jubilee Year of Mercy. I'm Brian Patrick with your EWTN News Link. Join us tonight for News Nightly.
The EWTN Family Celebration is coming to Birmingham, Alabama, September 17th and 18th. Save the dates and join us for a once-in-a-lifetime event, September 17th and 18th, celebrating the life and legacy of Mother Angelica.
For more information, go to EWTN.com and look for the Family Celebration box. That's EWTN.com and click on Family Celebration.
We're so glad you're with us on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. We're talking to Maria about her specific church. And Maria, forgive me, I did misunderstand you when you first called. I thought you were mainly talking about being involved in the church community, and now I understand it better. One question I have for you, Maria, is when you spoke to your pastor, the bishop had to give approval for the design of the church, obviously, or and ultimately the pastor for the church itself with the council and deciding what the layout was going to be. So what was the feedback you got? Is this just this is the way it was going to go with this church and this is the way we're doing it just because the council said so? Or what was the reason that it was given to you?
Mainly that the pastor on many of the issues of wanting some more traditional like beauty and richness and color versus monochromatic, no images, no beauty, no color, very stark and barren. He really would like some of that, but the committee votes all that down, so he's at their mercy.
And the committee being the architectural committee that's doing the campaign, or is this the councils? Or okay, so what
the committee that was formed that was to decide these things.
Okay. Well, I have actually. Well, I will tell you. This is. There was actually a committee at a parish that I worked at, and the pastor ended up getting rid of the committee and starting all over again, because he wasn't thrilled with the direction the committee had offered as advice. So the pastor has that ultimate rule, if you will. I mean, he has the final say for the community. So I think that, that's unfortunate. Jerry, what would you say about it? I mean, that's unfortunate.
Well, I just think, Maria, it's admirable what you're doing. You're asking this question. You're praying about it. And we certainly encourage you. I think I can speak for Debbie to continue to discern, get counsel, talk to other parishioners about this. But at the end of the day, we are free to go to other parishes if we want. Mm-hmm. And I just want to say about what my comments before the break, I was in no way playing down the importance of church architecture, because we look at earlier ages of the church. This is how the faith was handed on. The story of our faith was told in stained glass windows and the shape of the church and the art and the architecture and so forth. But again, it's not always a question of, well, the church is designed this way, so therefore it's not orthodox. But Maria, if I were in your position, I would seriously at least consider looking at other options for parishes in your area, because this is important to you and it's important to all of us. And if you've got this unfortunate situation, we can't speak for the mind of your pastor or the dynamics that are going on. But anyway, that would be a thought from me, Maria. I don't know if that has even crossed your mind.
It has, but I hate, many people did that, and I hate that thought of, it's like we're a family, and then you just disagree, and then, people walk away. I don't like that. It doesn't seem Catholic to me. It seems like we're supposed to work it out, and the bottom line is I'm committed to staying there, at least for now, because it's my home. I've been there for a long time. I kept hoping that things would change. They haven't yet, but I guess it's just hard. But I appreciate your feedback very much.
Maria, can you get on some of these committees? I mean, it sounds like you're hearing what's happening with the vote and everything that's going. But can you get on some of these committees?
I don't have the time at this point in my life.
Okay.
So no, I cannot.
Okay, yeah. Because sometimes you can get a better view of it when you're on some of these committees and see what the agendas are and where everybody's head is at and their heart is at when they join these different committees. You have to realize something. These committees that are formed, these are formed by fellow parishioners. Right. A lot of a lot of times people don't realize that, so it's important for people to for other people, if you do have time, get involved in your parishes. Maybe, Maria, you could go to some of your friends that think the same way you do at the parish and ask them to join some of these committees. I mean, you have to kind of get on the quote-unquote inside of it to find out what's going on, yeah.
Yes, very much. Well, just in part, I just want to say it's an incredible book that it was my feelings, but I couldn't have verbalized it. It's a book called Uglier Sin by Michael Rose. It's a fascinating book about art and architecture and what happened in the United States with a lot of our churches and the theology behind it. It's very fascinating.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Maria. Appreciate your call very much. And we are talking today more about other aspects of that's certainly one very important aspect of where our giving to our parish goes. But you might have other thoughts about this more generally speaking. How do you decide how much to give? Do you give part of your weekly offering to your parish? What about, do you have other ministries that you support? How do you as a family decide what you're going to do by way of giving? 1-800-585-9396. Over to James in North Dakota, listening to EWTN Radio on Real Presence Radio. Hi, James. You're on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Just some words of encouragement from Maria. We had a parish. It was very similar, a lot of crazy things like that going on. They built a church, and after they got done, the diocese then had actually made rules as to what has to be in a church afterwards. The parish in particular had no center aisle. The altar was set off to one side, and the priest sat in the center. And I went to mass there several times. And it just didn't feel Catholic. But it did change over time, and some parishioners left, some parishioners stayed, and it did make it way back, I think, into the Catholic Church. Also, on subject, more or less, there's tons of ways to give to the church. I do volunteer a lot, any kind of grounds maintenance kind of things. Whatever the church needs, there's a lot of talents that God gave us, and you don't necessarily have to give monetarily, and it's going to save your parish money in the long run. So I do a lot of that in my parish as well as tithe. So, I give to my parish. I trust that God put my pastor there in that position, and he's going to take care of me as my shepherd. So I kind of trust my pastor that way.
Good stuff. Time, talent, and treasure. That's important for us. Good point, James. Good point. We need to give of our time. We must volunteer and help and be part of the family, like Maria was talking about. We are part of a parish community, and it is a family. I agree with that completely. Jerry?
Well, yeah, when you think about when you're giving your time, what are you doing? You're saving the church expenses. A lot of people will volunteer. If a parish can't afford, say, a youth minister, which is, I think it should be a high priority in parishes because we need to tend to the spiritual needs of our youth. But let's say the budget won't allow that. Well, if somebody volunteers to be the youth minister, you're saving the parish, I don't know what a salary would be, $35,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year. So yeah, James, a great point. And do you see a lot of that, James, in your parish, that the people step up and give equally of their time as well as their treasure?
In certain aspects, depending on what their talents are. I'm a CCD teacher, and I was a landscaper tree trimmer, so I do tree work, and landscaping. They're doing a major project now, and when they get done, I'm going to finish the landscaping. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter, what you know. Somewhere along the line, God gave you a talent, and it's in need somewhere. I'll guarantee it.
Well, James, thank you for being in religious education. That's near and dear to me, and I think catechists are just amazing people that step up and are willing to share the faith and share it from their heart. And lives and souls are impacted. You may never see the fruit of that, James, until you reach heaven. But it's amazing. I tell catechists all the time, it's going to be amazing, God willing, when you get to heaven and you see those little ones that come up to you and say thank you because you were my CCD teacher, RE teacher. And so, James, thanks for doing that. And I would love to just throw a shout out to all the catechists. Thank you for stepping up and giving of your time and to help our children and our adults grow in their faith. Thanks, James. Wow.
Appreciate
beautiful.
the call, James. Yeah, from North Dakota. Daryl, we're going to get right to you in Los Angeles. Please don't go anywhere. And we've got a line open that James was on right there. Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on EWTN Radio, talking about our duty to give to our parish. It's really a duty regardless of a lot of different circumstances. How do you view that duty? And then what about, do you feel nickel and dime by second collections? Do you ever think about the power of your giving, the lives you're changing, the souls you might be helping to save? 1-800-585-9396.
Prayer is a conversation, and a conversation goes two ways. We speak and we listen. But how do we listen to God? Do we look for signs? I just saw a leaf blow across the street. Am I supposed to leaf my boyfriend? I guess God can use signs, but for the most part, He speaks more simply than that, through Scripture. Every day before anything else gets into your head, I want you to start by opening the Gospel according to iPhone. It's all right there. Just Google Gospel from Daily Mass. It's really short. Read it. Ask God what He's saying to you through His Word, and then talk to Him from your heart. Make that a daily habit, because if it's not, it'll never happen. Now you might be thinking, I'm not a monk. I can't pray every morning. Look, I know you're not. That's why I'm only asking you for something that takes about 2 minutes. And if you do that every day, I promise you, it will change your life. This is Chris Stefanik from reallifecatholic.com on EWTN Radio.
It's the start of a new day for Morning Catholic Radio.
The trial over Stairway to Heaven begins. The Estate for Spirit frontman Randy California says the Zeppelin classic rips off Spirit's 1968 song Taurus. Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page says he never heard that song. The true Stairway to Heaven is Holy Mass.
Amen.
There you go.
Amen. Preach it, brother.
Morning Glory, Catholic from the start. Weekday mornings, 7 Eastern on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
We are glad you're with us here on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, and there is no need to move that radio dial off of EWTN Radio. 3 p.m. Eastern Time, coming up in just a couple of hours. Father Mitch Packwood today on Open Line. He takes your calls on different church teachings and the faith and any question that you might have on your mind. You're not going to get much better answers and always the usual wit and wisdom of Father Mitch Packwood every Wednesday on EWTN Open Line. That's at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, Daryl, as promised, we're going to go right to you next, listening to EWTN Radio on Sirius XM 130 in Los Angeles. Hi, Daryl. You're on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
Hi, Jerry and Debbie. How are you?
Good, Daryl. Better now that you called. Thanks for reaching out.
Well, thank you. Hey, well, I had a comment. One is from a tithing perspective. I'm a convert to the faith. I've been Catholic now for 20 years and came from a very evangelical background, which really spoke a lot about tithing and giving back. So I was always mystified by the lack of giving in the Catholic Church and you know, the lack of tithing and people not really wanting to be responsible, and even starting with the amount on the donation envelopes, you know, or 0.5% or 1% equals this, and 2% equals that, you know. And so I just think that we as Catholics really need to do a better job understanding that the church is only as strong as we are individually and collectively, And we and it is our duty, it is our responsibility to give back to the building funds, to the schools, to our individual church, especially, where we're being quote unquote fed by the Eucharist with our community. To me, that's like number one. So, and we've been stretched as a family, my wife and I, and our kids, and putting our kids in Catholic education, all the things that are important to us. But it's just really important that we continue to make that the priority. So I just wanted to comment on that, if you don't mind. And then I had one other comment about this building thing, because I'm mystified about what the difference of liberal and conservative is when it comes to a construction of a church, because it seems like it's not, to me, that important in regards to, if you're in a community, you're in a community. And I laud the young lady that spoke earlier for not leaving because of, the way that the church is going to be rebuilt. So anyway, I just wanted to have those two comments.
Sure. Well, let me first say, Daryl, it feels kind of odd saying welcome home to the Catholic Church, because I don't consider you really a convert anymore, because you've been in the church for 20 years. And so God bless you. Thank you for responding to the Holy Spirit's promptings and coming into the church. I wanted to ask you something about, you said you have your kids in Catholic education. This is another question that a lot of people struggle with sometimes. Is my tuition that I'm paying for my kids going to Catholic school, should that be considered part of my tithe? And there are different views on that. I don't know, Daryl, I don't know if you look at it, you and your family, that way, or how you view that.
I mean, that's just something that's a choice, and I think, in addition to that choice to send our kids to Catholic school, we also are expected and, I feel like very obligated to tithe. So, and I don't mean it, obligation is probably an inappropriate word, but, I feel compelled to honor my God and my church and give thanks for what He's given us. And I think someone said earlier, it's not ours anyway. We're not giving God anything that we have. It's His money. It's His. They're His children. It's His wife that I married. We're just stewards of them.
Right. Daryl, it's interesting that you're talking about this, because I'm reminded about how I oftentimes some of my Protestant brothers and sisters will criticize the church, our church, and say, we're filled with tons of rules and regulations in the Catholic Church. And it's interesting because their churches require a certain dollar amount that has to be given to their church, whereas our church, the Catholic Church, we don't have a set amount. And it's very interesting. And you would think that since we are considered from the outside view a church of all these rules and regulations, we would have a dollar amount that has to be given. But we leave it up to the development and the understanding of the faithful to really decide of their maturity in tithing and what they understand about tithing and what they are willing to give. Like in your case, you've got a very expansive view of that, and you get all the elements of it, the responsibility of it, the privilege of it, and you're willing to give it forth. And that's something that has to be taught in our church. We don't really teach it very much from the pulpit. We don't. Money is not talked about that often. We talk about, we have a second collection for this, we have a second collection for that, the building fund, this and that, but we don't really talk about the catechesis behind the tithing. And it's always been something that I used to teach it in the church that I worked at, and I can't even begin to tell you how clergy would squirm in the pews because they didn't want to talk about money. They didn't want people to feel uncomfortable. But you're right. We must, in order to keep our churches and the ministries and the schools and everything thriving, it's important. And it is our duty and privilege and our ability to keep it. And that's in charge of us, the faithful. So I want to just commend you for reminding me of that, and then also being able to express that to everyone that we do have to play our part in it. And so if you have any words of wisdom on what's the best way to communicate that to people, because a lot of people are very, I don't know, it's interesting how people view money. It's always baffled me. Any comments on that, Daryl?
I think that it starts with, stewardship. In other words, like I said a little bit earlier, we're just here on earth. We're passing through. We've been given all these things that God, He's given this to us for us to be stewards of and over. And what that means is, we're to be wise stewards, but also to be generous. And then the second piece is that, from a challenge perspective, God rewards that cheerful giver. And there's some great scriptures that I think that you hear sometimes at pastoral services appeal time and all those types of times. But to me, it's something that you ingrain that, hey, listen, we can't function and do all things God wants us to do without you. And I think people sometimes they just think that, and they get really upset when you talk about money. I think now it's become so traditional that you don't talk about money that it's like a fear. It's become a huge fear factor. And I think to break down those bridges, you number one, you talk about, you said already, someone said earlier, time, talent, and treasure, and number one. But number two is stewardship. This is God's money anyway. It's not mine. Therefore, it's not mine. I have an obligation to give it back to where I believe that it's going to bear some fruit, and where I'm fellowshipping every single weekend, and where I'm going to church, and where I'm being fed the Eucharist. So if I'm being fed by my community, why wouldn't I help my community out? And that's the thing that I think we sometimes are afraid to talk about. And it's not like, you should, or it's a percentage. It's more like, this is what God it's just part of being a Christian. It's just a natural circumstance. It is what it is type of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, Daryl. And you know what just occurred to me as you were talking? A lot of times this starts with the pastor himself. And let me use my pastor as an example. He is very, very generous. He gets up. He's a very humble man, very generous, very transparent. He often will say, I want you people to know what we're doing with your money. And we have an area about an hour from here, lots of migrant workers. There's no way they could afford to build a church. Our parish, at a cost of $1 million, built them a parish for them to attend. My pastor, gentleman in his will, left our parish $2 million. My pastor split it up evenly among all the other parishes in the diocese, didn't keep any of it. And so what God and he has more money. I don't want to say this. He has more money than he knows what to do with. But the needs of our parish are always met, and there's always something there for us to give away. So I don't know, Debbie, you probably experienced that too, where if the leadership, if the pastor himself is leading by example, I think God is going to do amazing things in a parish like that. Absolutely. And I know your pastor, Jerry, and he's very great at communicating it to the parishioners. And he doesn't have, in my experience of him, he doesn't seem like he has any type of fear of talking about. He's very transparent. I love that about him. And you don't feel hammered for money. Exactly. Because you know, No, he's a great leader, a great leader, and you're very blessed to have him as your pastor. And but that's what needs to happen, because unfortunately there are a lot of pastors. They are so wonderful and kind-hearted and don't want to offend anyone, and they are very uneasy about talking about money, very uneasy, and it's and just because they're so good-natured and good souls. Okay, well, thank you so much, Daryl, for your wonderful comments. You really helped us today. We appreciate that so very, very much. God bless you and have a great rest of your day. Okay, we're going to move on to Michael in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We've got about 2 minutes. You're listening to EWTN Radio. Michael, we wanted to get you on. Welcome.
Sure, thank you. Real quickly, we lived in San Jose, California. I was at a men's conference. The guy said, if you're moving to Albuquerque, move to Rio Rancho because there's a great parish there. And boy, there is. Monsignor Ron just takes and has this parish jumping. There's so many things to do. There's not a night that goes by where you couldn't be at the church doing something. And he is not afraid to talk about money. So anyways, there you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you have parishes like that the ministries are thriving and people are really being fed spiritually, and they feel that sense of community, great things can happen. And so you're blessed, Michael. You're blessed to have found that wonderful parish community. And here's the other thing, too, I just want to add real quickly, Michael. You have Catholic radio in your area. And when Catholic radio is in different dioceses, it's so vital, because pastors will say all the time that they get the parishioners 1 hour a week, 1 hour a week, to be able to catechize them and to spiritually form them. But Catholic radio can do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's a great extension. And so many times when you have strong Catholic radio in different communities, the ministry involvement goes up, the plate giving, the collections go up, everything goes up because Catholic radio works. So please keep that in mind. A lot of times parishes may feel, well, if you give to Catholic radio, you're going to not give to the parish. That's not true. Many more times people will give doubly, because they give to their parish and then they give to Catholic radio. It's important to have strong Catholic radio. Michael, you're blessed. Thank you so very much. Are you involved? How many ministries are you involved in?
I'm involved with 2 right now, but when the school starts, I'll be involved with another one.
Wow.
Lord, what was it? Catholic radio. I listen to EWTN either on satellite or online because the Immaculate Heart has felt to do their own programming, and so a lot of the programs that I'm listening to, they don't get. So, which is a shame, but I guess you're limited to only 24 hours a day.
Right, but you have EWTN, so that's awesome. There you go.
Michael, thanks so much for being involved. And as we get set to close here, Deb, I just think, folks, it's so important that we support our parishes, pray about it, be open to God's will, and that's really it. You are changing lives and saving souls, and this has been an amazing conversation, Deb, as always.
Oh, absolutely. And dear listeners, you did it. You did it again. You hit a home run. This is awesome. Tomorrow we're going to talk about breaking minor laws. Boy, I can't wait to tackle that subject, Jerry.
Well, yeah, how do you feel about, it's only jaywalking. Well, I was only speeding. Well, I only ran a red light. It's not that big a deal. We're going to talk about that tomorrow on Take 2 with Jerry and Debbie.
Until then, have a beautiful and blessed day. See you real soon.